If we come to Japan, we only notice the surface. It is an effort to be part of the Japanese society. Japan has this necessity to get everybody on board. They need to preserve the smoothness and the harmony. Every human being is more boiling, except that in Japan it cannot surface. It's a very radical way. It's like death is the way.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Jean-François, who is the head of the French Chamber of Commerce here in the Kansai area. And we're going to talk a lot today about the role of chambers of commerce and how they work and what they contribute to the society, but also to companies back in France wanting to come and implement themselves here. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome. I'm very happy to be here too. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, especially on a hot day like this, you kind of beat the heat. But now we're in an air-conditioned space. It's all good. So before we get into what you do professionally, I want to ask a little bit about your background. And where did your Japan journey start?
Okay, if we go way back, my Japan journey started when I was about 15. And I stumbled upon a book called Hagakure. Actually, it was, of course, a translation. And that book is a book written around the 17th century. It's a kind of code, moral code or behavioral code for the samurai of the clan of Sagahan in Kyushu. It was written after the teaching of one of the samurai of the clan who was Yamamoto Jocho, I think. And for the 15-year-old me, that was a kind of a revelation because it was very, very different, a different way of thinking from what we're used to in our society, not only because it was from Japan, but also because actually it was from a different era. Of course, this book has not much to do with modern Japan, as I would discover later. But for me, it was still a big cultural shock, a different way of thinking.
So in school, you were reading Molière, and then you go home and you're reading this Hagakure.
Kind of, yeah. That's also what got me into philosophy, which was actually my major in university. But yeah, basically it was my first contact with Japanese culture, and I was just intrigued. And it took me some time, but I wanted to know more. So I always had that in my background. And little by little, I got closer and closer. It led me to martial arts, namely Kendo, and starting to practice Kendo in France. Eventually, I wanted to practice it in Japan to get closer to the real practice. And that's what brought me to Japan in the first place, yes.
So the first journey to Japan was to practice martial arts.
Yes.
Where did you go at that time?
At the beginning, of course, I was still like, when I started practicing Kendo, I was 20. I had just moved to Lyon for my studies for university. And fortunately for me, there was a dojo of Kendo in Lyon, because that whole time for those kind of 5 years between the discovery of that book and the moment I would finally be able to practice it, I wanted to practice not any martial art. I really wanted to practice Kendo because just since that book was inspired by the samurai spirit, the samurai culture, I thought the only way to really connect with it would be through the practice of the sword, not any Budo. Actually, probably I could have been able to do any of those and still find something that would connect me to the samurai, spirits or culture. Culture is a better word. But I really wanted to practice Kendo in particular. Also because a member of my family used to practice this, a kind of remote member, but so I had this image, and because it's so it's so classy, you know. Judo, you just have the judogi, but Kendo, you have the whole set, the armor with the helmet, the bogu, right?
It's quite impressive, right? When you see this whole black with a very big helmet, and then you have a lot of screaming as well. So it's like quite an experience.
Yes, and you have the sword, and I was drawn, I think, to the sword itself also. Of course, it's a bamboo sword in the case of Kendo, but still, you know, it's really the fighting in a way. It's the heritage of the way samurai were training to fight with the sword. So that really appealed to me. And it took me 5 years to be in a position to actually go to a training of Kendo. And when I studied, I was just caught up. And I during my studies, I was training at least twice a week for the first few years. Then I went to Japan, and I just trained every day.
Did you go to Saga, where the book was originally written?
No, actually, that's a good question. I never went to Saga. I went through Saga on my way to Nagasaki once, because I used to live in Kyushu also for a little while. But I never went to Saga. I know someone at the French Chamber of Commerce who is actually from Saga.
Okay.
So I always joke about it with her because, for me, that's one of the original starting points, as you say, of my journey to Japan. But also in my studies, then I studied the samurai culture much deeper, and I realized that although that book for me was a starting point, there were a lot more. There is a lot more literature about this culture than just the Hagakure. And actually, Hagakure is kind of extreme. It's an extreme viewpoint on the samurai culture.
It's a very strict way to look at things.
Yeah. I wouldn't say strict, although yes, also strict, but not only. It's a very radical way of looking at it. Very radical. It's like death is the way. You need to think about death every day, that kind of thing. It's a very, in that way, it's a strict code, strict manual. It's more manual than a code, manual. It's a strict manual, but it comes from a very radical point of view.
And eventually you get to finally be in Japan. You start practicing here and you get your first experiences. Now you're living here. You have a comfortable life in Osaka where you have settled. What was a point where you thought, I want to stay here and not kind of just temporary?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I think it took me a while to think I'm going to stay here. And I would say more, I didn't think at one point, I want to stay here. It was more a state of things. At some point, one thing leading to another, my life just became my life in Japan.
It just happened here.
Yeah, it just happened in Japan. To try to summarize it, I came while I was still in university. So I came first with a working holiday visa, which allowed me to practice a lot. But then working holiday visa is a one shot. So I needed another way. So I just did I just came back as an exchange student. I was still practicing every day. But at that time, that's when I really studied deeper the ethics of the martial arts. And that's when I got to understand Japanese culture more, both that old one and the new one. The old one because I was studying it through the books, and the new one because I was in a Japanese university. So Japanese university is like in any country, the university is a simplified version of society as an adult, right? It's kind of supposed to prepare you to be a shakaijin,
a citizen, a member of society.
A member of society more than a citizen, because in Japan, being a citizen is very different from what we mean by that in France. So yeah, a member of a society. And actually, that first contact during university kind of scared me And I'm not the only one. I know a lot of French people who were drawn to Japan, who came here as students, university students, did their exchange, and then came back to France and never came to Japan again, at least not for work or anything.
What were those things that kind of scared people off?
It's hard to summarize it because I would say it was like some kind of little touches that little by little paint a society that is it's not easy to live in Japanese society because not just because it's foreign for us, not just because it's different culturally in itself, it's not that different, but it's to say it very quickly, it requires a lot of efforts to really, if you really want to dive in the Japanese society, if you want to be a true part of it, it takes a lot of effort.
So you don't just become a shakaijin, a member of society, you have to work to become this member and continuously work on it while you are part of the society, as opposed to maybe other countries where you might just slip in there and mix and dissolve in the mass.
Yeah, it's from my point of view, it's hard to really. I don't know what it is to come to a Western society as a foreigner, as an Asian or an African, and I don't know firsthand what it is, and probably requires a lot of efforts to probably, but for sure, for a Westerner to come into Japanese society and wanting to be a part of it, it is going to require a lot of effort if you really want to be a part of it. I mean, the first obvious thing is the language. Okay, you're going to have to learn the language and to master it to a quite high level if you really want to be part of the system. But of course, not only that, and it's not only, that's the thing with Japanese society. It's not just a question of tolerance, or it's not just a question of being able to accept that it is different. Because this, in my opinion, is not necessarily that difficult with any culture. Accepting the difference is, okay, it's part of the process. But my impression is that even for the Japanese, it is hard. It is an effort to be part of the Japanese society. Much more, in my opinion, much more than it is an effort for a French person to be part of French society. Because the Japanese society applies a lot of pressure on, compared to other societies, I know, on its components, on people, in order to preserve that kind of, we would say, harmony, balance, smoothness that there is in the Japanese society. And as foreigners, particularly as tourists, if we come to Japan, we only notice this. We only notice the surface, right? It's very smooth. It's very nice. And often that's something that that is going to seduce people as tourists or as first comers to Japan. Wow, this society seems so great, and in many ways it is. Don't get me wrong, but because it's so smooth, people are so polite and so on. But what they don't see is that under this, it's actually kind of boiling, truly, and it's smooth on the outside, because the smoothness is being preserved by everybody in accordance with everybody else. And this requires a lot of effort, because naturally every human being is more boiling, okay? In a society, there are a lot of things that are going to perturb you, upset you, and so on. Except that in Japan, it cannot surface. You have in many ways, you have to keep it down, to keep it inside. And that is what requires a lot of effort.
And so when you are at university and you're kind of in this training school to become a Shakaijin, you see a lot of people that get scared of it and decide to go back home, and that Japan is maybe not the place for them. But you decide, no, I want to explore even more. I want to become this Shakaijin. And so you start working for a company that exports product as a sales representative.
That's precisely where it's a little more complicated, because at first I was scared too. So there is a gap in my curriculum where for 3 years I went actually back to France because I was still hesitating. So I said a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot of people, but yeah, some of the people I know decided they're not going to work in Japan. Some other friends of mine during university, they dived right in. It's the opposite. They were here for a reason, and they just found after the university, they just found a job, and they just started working. So that kind of people also exist, and most of them were very successful. They had a much better level of Japanese than myself. Me, that's where I hesitated. I went back to France for a few years, and I was still thinking what to do with my future, actually. That's only after that. Actually, for a little while, I was a teacher's assistant in school in the suburbs. And that's a very important point, because it's those 3 years were decisive in how I would, it shaped the way I would see management for later. Okay, so that was very important in my career. Then during those 3 years, actually, the longing for Japan just built up, which is funny. I kind of left thinking maybe it's not for me, but actually during 3 years, more and more, I wanted to come back to Japan. So that's more how it happened, you know. I left, and then I realized, no, I want actually to be there.
So how did you end up at this, or rather, how was it for you to re-enter Japan at this company and be a working member of society and see the business culture and the inner workings of this?
Okay, so as for everything in most of my career, I was kind of lucky. I had a hard time to find a job from France, but eventually some friend of mine recommended me to a company, small company in Kumamoto, Kyushu, and that company was making Kendo equipment, so that was perfect for me. And they had a small department that was selling it overseas through an e-commerce platform. I don't even remember what it was at the time, but so yeah, thanks to her, I got hired, and that was my re-entry point in Japan. And also it was very nice because it got me to discover Kyushu more, and it's a lovely place in general, Kumamoto in particular, but Kyushu in general. So I'm very lucky I started there. And also, and that will be relevant later, but it also strengthened my love for the regions in Japan, and not only Tokyo. Everybody thinks Japan, they think Tokyo. Me, I like the regions in Japan. And this company, yeah, it's typical small Japanese company. So not a lot of rules. How to say? Yeah, we didn't have a lot of holidays.
Yeah, a lot of work and a lot of procedures to follow, and a hierarchy, I can imagine, with maybe a very strong relationship between kohai, senpai, and kacho, bucho, and shacho.
Yes, it's funny because in many ways, actually, it was not that strong. It's a strange mix. Okay, it's a strange mix because it was a rather traditional small company in the countryside. Kumamoto is 700,000 inhabitants, which in Japan is the total
it's
countryside.
Bigger than Toulouse, where I'm from.
Yeah, it's big. It's almost bigger than Lyon, or almost the same size. But in Japan, it's the countryside, right? So, yeah, but in many ways, that company was founded by a guy that was at the time still like maybe 36, 37. So very young. Yeah, very young. I mean, very young, rather young. And most of the staff was the same kind of age. Plus, we were all Kendo practitioners, like almost the whole staff. And most of them actually at a rather high level. So we also had this, despite the work and the hierarchy inside the company, we also had the camaraderie that is usually going on in I don't know, Kendo club or something like this. So it was kind of, balanced by this. On the other hand, anyway, the Kohai-senpai relationship, I'm used to it since I'm 20, because that's, even in France, that's what we have in a dojo, even if it's, the tone is a little different, but I'm kind of used to it. So that was not the problem. No, the problem is really the work ethic. If I have to point out a problem, is that, yes, it's the system is not necessarily very efficient. And despite, I'm talking really about that company in particular, it's not necessarily general, but there is a hierarchy, but at the same time, every individual is rather free to do what they want inside, their own fields, which means that sometimes your own superiors are going to take decisions that will impact you, but that are not controlled by everybody. That's something that really strikes me now. I know a little more about it, regarding the difference between Japanese companies and French companies. If I need to point out big differences, that again, it's just a generality, but we always say that in Japan, the hierarchy is very strong, and which would imply that in France or in the West, the hierarchy is not that strong. I kind of disagree, because yes, on the outside layer, okay, in a Japanese company, the hierarchy is super strong between the bucho, the kacho, the jicho, the shocho. They have like so many titles, and you can like rank
fuku kacho and fuku bucho.
Yes, also, yeah. And you have bucho, but you also have home bucho
and jigyo bucho.
Yes, exactly. Okay. You have so many titles, and yes, there is this hierarchy. But first of all, age usually supplants titles. I've seen in different situations, but I've seen people with kind of more power than their actual superiors, just because they were older. And nobody would tell them anything or criticize anything just because they are older. So age is actually sometimes the real hierarchy in a company. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, in a Japanese company, yes, regarding like protocols and the like, the titles and the hierarchy are very important, very strong. But when it comes to decision making, the decisions are very often actually very, I don't know if we can say that in English, collegial, like very
as a team group decisions.
General, yeah, group decisions. And from my experience in France, it's not the case at all. In France, we all act like we're more friendly, and the hierarchy, it doesn't matter that much. But actually, decision making is usually very, very vertical. Like the boss makes a decision, is going to go through the people. But if the boss says something, everybody is going to follow, and they don't have much to say about it. He's the boss. He decides. In a Japanese company, it's quite different actually. in my experience, it's very rare that someone at the top decides something and then everybody has to go through it. No, because Japan has this how to say, it's not a need, it's more like this habit or this
desire.
Non, c'est l'exigence.
Oh, the requirements.
Yes, yes. Japan has this requirement or this necessity to get everybody on board when something is decided. Because of, as in the whole society, they need to preserve the smoothness and the harmony. That's rather true. And for that, it means that before making a decision, you kind of need everybody to agree. And allegedly, the liberty you have to refuse is very small. So if someone at the top says like they'd like to do it that way or something, it's not like you can really refuse, but still it's going to go through a process that everybody is going to be brought up to speed and everybody is going to have kind of an opportunity to voice their opinion and so on and so on. So the decision making is much more general, much more common, shared than in a French company, in my opinion, or let's say in my experience rather.
So you've had a very formative period at this company where you got to experience the insights of how maybe a smaller company works, but also how the structure and the co-working atmosphere is there. And eventually you are now the head of the French Chamber of Commerce in Kansai. How did you come to this position today?
Okay, so what I just described doesn't come only from this first experience. Actually, this because at first I didn't realize all this. This what I just talked about was rather built over all the companies I worked for until I entered the French Chamber, and that indeed was a kind of a journey. So the first company was that small company in Kyushu, but actually I stayed there only for a year. It kind of stopped when they refused. They didn't let me take my holidays to go back for Christmas.
Yeah, I can understand that. This is a small thing, but for us it's important.
For us, it's very important. Like that can be. I'm joking about it now because actually now for me it wouldn't be that important. But at the time it was, and also because it's very representative of that kind of discrepancies that the Japanese would not understand why it's so important for us, but we won't understand why they don't understand why, and so on and so on. But yes, that's the kind of things where it can get the conflict can arise. Yes, and holidays in Japan, it's a very tender subject.
Yes.
Okay. So that was the first experience. But fortunately for me, at the end of that job, I was actually anyway recruited by a the French founder and CEO, I think is the title of a Japanese company. He made his company in Japan, in Tokyo. It was more or less the same business, and he offered me a rather good position. I was to manage the company just under him. With my experience from this previous company, so it was interesting, and I spent about 2 years in this company in e-commerce, and that was a completely different experience because the boss being French, we were really working in a rather French environment, but still in Japan. But the interesting thing is that I was now in a managerial position and with a mixed team, both French and Japanese. So it was interesting. And also I learned a lot about efficient organization inside the company, which he was very good for that. So for me, that was a very formative time that I would use later. And also it was my first true experience of management in which I could use what I learned managing young teenagers in a high school in the suburbs in France. So it was very interesting. I could talk about that, but not today. It would take too much time. And next was my first real deep experience in a Japanese company. I was actually hired by my father-in-law. Probably if it were not the case, it would have been difficult for me to join a really real Japanese company at that level. When I mean that level, I don't mean the level of my position. I mean that kind of Japanese company was already like more than a staff between a core staff of 50 people, but with all the people working for the company, it was more like 300.
Yeah, it's a rather mid-sized to large company already.
Yes, yeah. And so for the first time, I was in a sufficiently big structure for me to understand how a Japanese company works. Of course, I don't have any experience of the Daikigyo, the very big company. This is yet another world, I think, that I don't have first-hand experience of, but at least I could understand how like the basic functioning of a Japanese company. And more importantly, I was actually hired for Eigyo, so sales. I was a sales rep. And in the beginning, it was a total catastrophe because my level of Japanese was rather good for daily conversation. I was completely okay talking to, for instance, to my staff in the former company. It was no issue for me to interact with the Japanese staff. No problem at all. But this is a completely different matter to talk to people on a daily basis and to do a commercial presentation of a product in front of representatives of another company. So in the beginning, it was very hard for me. First of all, I didn't have the level of Japanese required for that, So, of course, this is true of most languages. This is definitely true of French languages, but the way you talk normally to people, or even like we are doing now, and the way you talk when you're in a business environment, particularly with like partners or customers, is rather different. We don't use the same word, we don't use the same formulas, we don't even use the same grammar sometimes. And this is very, very true for Japanese language. So, and even the Japanese students, they don't know how to speak properly the
business language.
The business language. I discovered that again recently because I had some interactions with Japanese students and by emails, and it's funny because I can see they don't know sometimes how to write a proper business email. So that's something we learn. Even in France, we learn. Okay. But in Japan, I didn't know how to do this, and I had those presentations, and so I was terrible at it at first, very really terrible. But fortunately, my direct senpai were about my age. They were kind of nice to me. I had trouble with some other people in the hierarchy, but they were nice, and they guided me a lot to write emails and to practice the speech and so on. And like really for the first year or year and a half, at least, it was very hard. And I felt like just doing the, katsudo hokoku, the report on what we did like that week, that we would do every week, I could feel like the way I expressed myself was terribly low. That's a very hard experience, but very important experience to do once in your life, to do this in a completely foreign language and to realize that you can only express yourself as a 10-year-old level.
That's difficult.
That's difficult. Of course, you can say, I want to drink this, or I want to do that. That's normal conversation level. Any 10-year-old can do this. But when you have to report on what you did, on explain your numbers, explain who you met and what they told you and so on, and you can only express yourself as a 10-year-old, this is a very humbling experience. And you realize language is very, very important. And I always stress this when I talk to people who want to come to Japan, come do business in Japan or come work in Japan, is don't underestimate the language issue. It's going to be huge, and it's not like inside Europe when you're, German, English, French, Italian, Spanish. It's pretty similar. Once you know the word, the grammar is very close. Of course, it requires some work to even to reach that business level too. It requires some work. But Japanese is a completely different way of thinking. So the gymnastic you have to do in your mind is an order of magnitude above all this.
So before joining the Chamber of Commerce, you actually had these kind of other very formative experiences that gave you very different perspectives of life in Japan at Japanese companies and foreign companies made in Japan. So what was the moment like? When did the Chamber of Commerce come into play here?
Again, it was just sheer luck. So I was still working for my father-in-law. I've been there for almost 3 years. At some point, I was even doing the repairs for some machines, and little by little, I eventually, even without realizing it, my Japanese level actually increased. Yeah. Just to give you a reference, when I entered this company, my father-in-law's company, I just got the N2, the NIKU, at the Japanese language proficiency test. So I felt I was okay, you know. And even with this, it was very hard, and I had to do this one step further, like this further step to really get to the business Japanese level. But after a while, even if thanks to the work, my Japanese became much more effective. And I finally became valuable for the company to sell things. The culture of the business culture inside the company was starting to weigh more and more. That
social pressure that we were discussing earlier.
Exactly. I mean, there were also some circumstantial reasons with my relationship with some of the people inside the company, or just normal
human interactions.
Human interactions inside the company. You always are. What can happen in any company? You have people you like, people you dislike, and the fact also. That's rather personal, but I didn't work directly with my father-in-law. I was in a different branch. I was in Tokyo. The Honsha, the main office, was in Nagoya. And anyway, as part of the family, he couldn't really interfere with how I was integrated in the team, because that would be seen. Like if he was interfering, that would look bad. Okay.
Well, because in the company he's a CEO, so he has to act as CEO and not as a father-in-law, and kind of
exactly. And this I understand 100%. And actually, if he would have tried to treat me differently, or if it would have been hard even for me, I don't think it would have been a good thing. But I had some trouble with some people in my hierarchy who kept having me doing, how to say, very basic jobs. Once I got used to the business Japanese, I could proficiently talk French, English, Japanese, and we were importing stuff from abroad. So I thought at some point I would be able to be in charge of the, let's say, negotiation or relation with the companies we were working with in the US. That was making sense for me, even more so because almost no one else in the company could speak English, at least at my level, for sure. And my hierarchy kept asking me to do this
unrelated tasks.
Yeah, it's at least, I could not use my language skills. So that was something a little frustrating. And also, how to say, like, I will sound like bragging a little, but I have a master's degree, and I was still doing jobs. I think it's really important to do field job. It's very important. But if you do only this and you have a certain capacity to also organize work and so on, at some point you want to do not only this but more. And in many ways I try to show in my department how I was able to maybe bring something more to the company, like reorganize some stuff, bring more efficiency in the digitalization and so on. But that was never, no one tried to build on that or to give me more responsibilities. And I know that you could say, but in Japanese companies, things have to go slowly and so on. This is kind of true, but I also have counterexamples of people who were given the possibility to do that.
So in a way, it's kind of like in the West, right? You have companies with people that will take advantage of someone's skill set and promote them if they perform and so on. And you have that in Japan too, the same way as you have companies that just try to keep their structure. They don't want to utilize their teams. And for you, that was a signal like, okay, I've learned a lot, I've improved my Japanese, and now it's time for me to take my skills somewhere new.
Exactly. And it was a big deal because it was my father-in-law's company. So you can see how in Japan...
A difficult conversation.
It could be a difficult conversation. As it happened, it was not difficult. When the time came, my father-in-law took it very well. So I was very lucky there. But it was we were not looking forward to the conversation in the beginning. But to say it quickly, I was becoming more and more frustrated with the job and thinking I could do much more. So I was looking for a different job simply. And at some point I thought, okay, why not try French companies in Japan where I can be in a more international environment. That's where I tried to contact the French Chamber of Commerce, and I asked if they knew any French company that would have a position open for me. And they said, no, we don't, but we're going to have a position opening soon in Kansai that could match your profile. Do you want to take it? And in my opinion, that was a very good match. I was very happy with the position. I didn't really know what I was getting into at that moment. It was hard for me to picture what the job would be. But anyway, I could feel that it would be interesting for me. So I took it.
So for someone who's maybe not so familiar, I mean, Chamber of Commerce, if you hear that, you think of a place where there's trade happening or where maybe companies meet or there's like business exchange. Can you summarize and maybe explain what is the Chamber of Commerce and what is its purpose?
Yes, that's a very good point. A lot of people have a hard time, when I have to describe what we do, a lot of people have a hard time understanding, picturing what we do. So we don't do trade by ourselves. Basically, the best way I can describe the French Chamber of Commerce is that we are a business hub, a business community. So before anything else, we are a network. Okay, the basic structure is that we have members, so they pay a membership fee. A yearly membership, and they are members of the French Chamber of Commerce. And the French Chamber of Commerce is this hub where they can all meet. Okay, they can all interact with each other. Of course, we have how to say, there is a list of all their contacts that they can access to contact each other. More importantly, they can ask us, the staff, like, I'm looking for that kind of company. Who do you know? Okay, I would say my main business is to know people, to know who is doing what with who, what kind of project is going on, and so on and so on. So when someone new or someone I already know comes to me with, I was thinking I have this kind of idea, or I would like to do that kind of thing, or don't you think it would be interesting to push that kind of theme or subject. And then I can immediately start to make connections with other people I know, with their interest and so on. So mostly our job is to connect people, connect companies together.
Being the French Chamber of Commerce, does this mean it's mostly between French companies and Japanese companies, or can any kind of company become a member and join into this network?
That's also a very big prejudice. A lot of people think because we are the French Chamber of Commerce, most of the members are going to be French, or all the members are going to be French. It's not the case. First of all, almost half of our members are Japanese companies, okay, who have an interest in doing business with France. Then, of course, a huge bulk also is made of French companies that have or want to have business in Japan. And there is a healthy percentage, I think about like 15 maybe percent of what we call international companies, which basically means they are neither Japanese nor French. So the French Chamber of Commerce has this particularity to be very international, very open. As I said, we are a business hub. When you want to be a business hub, you really aim at being at the center of any business that can happen. So we are not closed at all. We're open to any kind of companies. We have companies from the UK, from Australia, from Singapore, from Germany. Okay, it's very open, and our aim being to connect them together, but also to give a lot of support. We are where we are the best is when it comes to Japan itself. Okay, so a foreign company that wants to either bring its business to Japan or learn more about the business they can do in Japan, just the possibility they want to explore, or if they want to develop a business that is already existing in Japan. All this, we have related services that we can offer. It can be, recruiting. We can help them to recruit staff. Mostly, of course, we are best when it comes to international staff, multilingual, or we can help them with if they don't have an entity in Japan, but they still want to hire staff here to start prospecting for new customers. We can hire people for them, instead of them, and they're going to pay us for that. We can also give them an address in Japan, or even rent them a physical desk for their staff. We have this in Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka, actually, this kind of service. So many, I mean, several locations. We can help them doing the market analysis. We can help them communicating if they want help with communication. We can do advertising and so on, social media, but mostly B2B. We don't really do B2C. So
you said that you actually didn't really know what you were walking into when you took on that position. And from what you describe, what the Chamber of Commerce does is very, very broad. What is a typical day like for you now?
Well, as you just said, what we do. Okay, I need to explain a little the structure of the French Chamber first to explain what is my position in particular. So the main office is in Tokyo. And we have several departments there. I hope my colleague won't hate me for bringing it down to 3 main departments. There are others, but one is service to the members. So everything that goes around the member, the membership, and so on. That includes also training. Yeah, we also do a lot of trainings, specific like business trainings for like executives or. That also includes recruiting and communication. Then we have the events department. So this department takes care of organizing all or most of the events of the French Chamber of Commerce. That's a lot. Last year we did 126 in 1 year.
That's nearly 1 every 3 days.
That's about that. Yeah, and out of 126, 42 happen in the regions. I'm going to come to that later. So that was my department. And then the third one, that is the third of those three main departments, is support business. We call it in English business development, support to the companies. So they can help like Japanese company to source products from France. They can help French companies to find customers or partners in Japan. They can organize missions in Japan for foreign companies that want to come 1 week and meet a lot of potential partners or customers, that kind of things. It's also the department that deals with our shared offices. Sorry. So yeah, a lot of services to help develop your business in Japan, expand it, and so on. All this has to do with the department I'm responsible for, which is actually, you said, and it's not wrong, I'm the head of the Kansai desk, but actually I'm the head of all the regional desks. I supervise all three. We are the foreign chamber with the most kyoten Japanese,
like local
most
desks.
branches.
Branches.
Most local desks, which is very important. We have one in Nagoya for the Chubu area, one in Osaka for the Kansai area, and one in Fukuoka for the Kyushu area. And it is really important because it allows us to have a real network in all of those areas. It means every time we have at least one staff connected to all the local institutions. And those connections are not remote. We really know the people there, which in Japan is absolutely crucial, because the relationship in Japan is always built on the long term, even more so when it comes to regions. So it is very important to have actual staff on the ground that is able to, that will know the people and is able to call someone or go see someone and say, hey, we want to do that kind of project. Are you in? Or it's very, very important, because the trust is only built on the long term and on a personal relationship. So this is very important. I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud that the team I have with me is able to do this, and that almost no other foreign chamber of commerce in Japan has such a wide capacity. Of course, they can do a great job too, and in maybe different ways too. But on that particular point, I'm very proud of what we can do. So when we want to, I'm responsible for supervising this, but of course the groundwork, which is absolutely paramount, is done by the staff on the ground in Nagoya, Osaka, and Fukuoka.
So you have no typical day.
So yeah, to go back to your question, I don't have a typical day because the reason why I explained all this is we do everything that Tokyo does, but they all have a specialty, but we are connected to all those, except that we're doing it in a smaller scale in the regions. So my day can be, in the morning I have a meeting with some of the people in Tokyo or some other team members to discuss strategy or ongoing projects. Then I can meet with someone from Osaka City or from the Chamber of Commerce of Kobe regarding another project. Then I can go meet with some members because either they're new and I need to get to know them, or they have a specific thing they want to talk to me, or I can meet with people who want to join the French Chamber, but they don't know if it's right for them and what they can do with us. So I'm going to, that's my sales rep experience useful there. I'm explaining what we can do for them, or so meetings. If I were to say a lot of meetings, but also a lot of actually more than I wish I could do more meetings. My basic responsibility would be to be a sales rep for the French Chamber. But I do also a lot of office work. First of all, because we have a share office in Osaka, also one in Nagoya. And we are the people on the ground to take care of that. So it means I can have some residents that have a problem with the copy machine, or they want to change the coffee or something, you know. In that case, in Kansai, I have another colleague who is taking care of most of it, but my colleague in Nagoya, she's going to have to deal with this by herself. And on a certain level, if it comes to negotiating a contract for one of those desks, or I also often get involved, so that's more desk work. Also, I need to manage the team, the whole team. So sometimes I just need to do like management stuff, not how to say, like timesheets or budget or that kind of things. So yeah, typical day is hard to describe. It really depends.
You said your role was to kind of know the right people for the people asking and become this network and this hub. And you also said that it's very important in Japan to build relationships on the long term, which is why you need to meet in person and so on. How do you approach this? How do you get about kind of building those long-term relationships in Japan? I can imagine a lot of maybe entrepreneurs or people coming here or wanting to settle here. They are all also facing this challenge of building long-term relationships. How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, there are many ways to answer that. First of all, don't be in a rush. I mean, the answer is already in the question in a way that you need time. You're going to need time. Again, I think there is a little difference between Tokyo. Like Tokyo is a business heart of Japan. Okay, so things go faster, but at the same time, relationships are more asai, not as deep, right?
More superficial.
More superficial. In the regions, those relationships take more time to build, but in my opinion are also stronger. Like once people got to know you and they, I mean, I don't know if I can say they like you, because in business it's not a question of like and dislike. It's more, but it still has to do with trust, reliability. Once they think they can rely on you, then they become closer partners than I think that could be in other places. That's what I like with the regions. Like the interpersonal relationship is deeper. So how do you do this? How do you achieve this? First of all, be reliable on the long term. And I don't mean I'm doing that perfectly. In many cases, I'm not able to do it for many reasons, either personal or circumstantial. But at least that's what I would try to do. In Japan, it's very important that you keep your word. I mean, it's true everywhere. It's a little wrong to say in Japan. It's true everywhere. But in Japan in particular, and in the regions in Japan in particular, it's very important to to make promises and to keep them, like to get involved and to keep your engagements. That's the first thing. Be reliable. Japanese companies are looking for reliable partners. That's a general rule. It doesn't mean it's going to be always the case, but as a rule of thumb, I think it's pretty.
They want
true.
to know that if you're offering something to them today, you can still offer this in 5 years or in 10 years.
Yes, that's very true. Yes, the long term is also very important. When you get in a relationship with a Japanese company, it's a long-term relationship. I mean, at least that's what they're going to want. Compared to other countries where it's more like, okay, today this has more advantage for us, but if tomorrow a better offer comes, we're going to shift without ever looking back. In Japan, it's not the case. And you have the two sides of the coin, right? It means once you have a good relationship going, you're pretty good, okay? Like this relationship, if you don't mess, you're gonna keep it for long. But if you mess up, you're dead for them.
There's no coming back.
Yeah, it's very hard, or at least it's very hard to come back from. If you didn't deliver, I mean, depends how much you messed up, but if you didn't deliver on a promise, this will not be taken lightly, and you can lose a relationship forever for very, I wouldn't say small details. We're not that, but
if you don't deliver a shipment that they are asking for, that you sign a contract for, if you're late, then
for instance, if you're and that's also why in the building of the relationship, in the early days of the relationship, and it's going to be true after, but it's even more important for the first impression, the small stuff are really important. Like, I know this, like, everybody, we've heard it 100 times, but it's still very true. Don't come late to an appointment. Like, French people, if we're late like 10, 15 minutes, we can always like excuse ourselves. I'm sorry, I was called up in a meeting, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of okay. It's kind of accepted. It's never going to work in Japan. If you do this, people are going to smile and say, okay, I understand. But still, inside, they're going to think, okay, that person is not reliable. And probably you just from the start, you just missed your opportunity to do business with them, probably. So that's where my experience in Japanese company was very useful. Is you're trained like this when you're in a Japanese company. When you have an appointment, you are there 10 minutes early, and you wait next to the door. And when it's 5 minutes before, you knock and you enter. And there's the whole ritual. You know how to behave, like to call the right person, to how to give your business card, what to say, how to start the meeting. Okay, all this is rather important. That's also actually what the French Chamber of Commerce can help foreign companies with, because all this, we know it, we know how it works. That's also why I got the job, by the way, because not only do I speak Japanese, but with that experience, I know how to deal with Japanese companies, or I would say more importantly, with the Japanese institutions like the city office, or they feel comfortable because they realize that I know how to behave. So everything can go smoothly, and they know they can, at least from the start, they think, oh, probably I will be able to trust that person because already he knows how to behave. Then you need to build the trust through the actual delivery contract and so on. But it is also very important to be rather aware of how to behave with your Japanese interlocutors. Of course, if some people tell me, yeah, but if you're a foreigner, you cannot have the gaijin pass, the foreigner pass, because the Japanese will know you're not a Japanese, so they will excuse you if you're not perfect. That's true to a certain extent. That's true if they don't think your behavior is your behavior makes you unreliable. So that's true, but if you come 15 minutes late to a meeting, they think you're not reliable.
And this has nothing to do with you being a foreigner or not. Yes, it's just you're not a reliable person.
It's just you're not reliable. Or if you don't deliver, or if, I don't know. Also, it's not only a question of reliability. It's a question of, okay, in Japan and in Japanese language, a lot of things are said without being said out loud, right? You're probably familiar with this, but it has to do a little with what they call inshin denshin, this kind of telepathic. I don't really, it's not really telepathic, okay, but it's just you have to feel what your partner wants to deliver as a message, what message they want to deliver, because not everything is going to be said out loud, but they're going to imply it, and it's your job to catch the ball and to understand the meaning that they really want to say. One of the most obvious is Japanese people have a hard time to say no. If we don't agree to something, we will very easily say, no, I'm not interested. I'm sorry, I'm not interested. It's okay. In Japan, it's hard to say no. So most of the time, people won't say no. But when they don't want, there are ways in Japanese to say no, and that cannot really be mistaken.
It seems difficult. 難しいね.
Yes. But it's not only a question of words, it's also a question of like intonation, or sometimes it can be through an email where they say, okay, this proposition is very interesting, but, and so on and so on and so on. And as a French, we tend to think, okay, but they leave the door open or something. No, this is, you have to understand, this is no. And you need to know when it's no or when you can still push. Those little nuances are really hard to catch if you don't know Japanese culture. So not only language, but culture and business culture.
You've had the opportunity through your job now to connect multiple companies from France or abroad in Japan. What makes some of those collaborations successful? And then on the other hand, what do you see as common mistakes, maybe besides reliability, where you see partnerships kind of falling apart?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, first of all, I would say you need to have on both sides a very good understanding of what people actually want, or what's the actual goal, and what's the actual need. Okay, because basically business is matching goals with needs. You want to bring a product to a market, and you need to match it with the needs of this market. If you don't care about the needs and you really want to push the product, probably it's not going to be successful because you're not listening. And on the other side, when you need something, because you can need something that you want to get from a partner, you need to be able to express this need precisely in an understandable way, so that the right partner can be found. And the reason why it would not work is when this matching is not made properly. You build too much expectation. You think, my product is great, so it's going to work in Japan, but you didn't properly analyze what is the real trend or need in the Japanese market. And then you try to, or how the market works, and you're going to try to push your product because you're convinced that it's going to work, but actually it's not, or it's not what the interlocutor wanted, or so I think that's the first thing. You need to you need to give yourself time to understand what is really needed, or what is really offered, to match it properly with what you have. I would say that's the main aspect. So to go back a little, like if you want to do a good matching in Japan, again, in Japan or anywhere else, but you need to come with your mind kind of blank and be ready to listen, to feel the ground. Okay, follow maybe the advice of the people who are more familiar with the market. It can be the French Chamber. We usually can give a lot of advice, but also a lot of other partners that we have, people who are already in this field. So I think it's very important to build first a comprehensive picture of what you're getting into.
Listen first and do research.
Yes, it's important to listen. Listen. What is the? I mean, that's kind of dumb advice, because in a way that's kind of obvious, but
maybe in the West we have a tendency to want to talk more than listen, or talk first before we listen.
Yes, that's true. And in Japan, you need to realize that how to say, pushing something doesn't mean success. In other markets, I think I'm really not a specialist of other markets, and even not of Japanese market, but my impression is that in some other countries, in some other markets in the world, maybe if you push something, eventually it's going to work. Or if you negotiate. French people, I feel maybe we have this idea that if you didn't sell your product, it's because you didn't push it well enough or strong enough. So in Japan, I can see some people, they want to push. In some cases, it might work sometimes, but in most cases, in my opinion, the more you're going to push with Japanese interlocutors, the more they're going to shut down and shut you out.
So you're now head of the Kansai desk and the other regions, Chubu and Kyushu. What makes those regions particularly interesting at the moment? How are they different than what is happening in Tokyo, which you've described earlier as the business hub of Japan?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Tokyo remains, I would say, unfortunately, the main hub, the main business center of Japan. It still drags a lot of activity. But in a way, that's a very personal comment, but in a way, I think it's a little sad because it's just this one big spot. And Japan has so much more to offer. So if I go geographically, Chubu, and more than Chubu, like in Chubu, Aichi remains the main center.
With Nagoya.
So the region around Nagoya is the prefecture of Nagoya is Aichi. Aichi is mostly famous for its car industry because you have Toyota. And when we say we have Toyota, yes, but all the other subcontractors or branches that Toyota has around it. So
it's like Airbus in Toulouse.
Exactly, the same. And because we're talking about Airbus, also Aichi is very famous for the aero industry. So plane industry. I don't know how to say, but so that's another one. And actually, that's why we recently moved. We have a series of conferences, like sectoral conferences, 6 actually, that we organized throughout the year. And so far, it was all in Tokyo. And just a couple of years ago, thanks to my colleague in Nagoya and the cooperation of Tokyo, of course, we moved the aerospace conference to Nagoya. It was actually a huge success. It's a partnership with the local Chamber of Commerce, the Nagoya Chamber of Commerce, and it worked very well because the Aichi region is also specialized in this aerospace industry. So you have a lot of industry in general in Nagoya. Of course, it's not the only strong point of the region, but
like Tebasaki and so on.
Yes. Of course, you have a lot of culinary specialties and so on. But regarding the French Chamber, the Chamber of Commerce, I would say this is the main strong point of the region. That's also why this year we helped organize the Smart Manufacturing Summit. Actually, the main organizer was, if I'm not mistaken, GL Event. It was their initiative. So they're an eventmental company from Lyon, in France. But they're present in Japan, rather strong actually. I think they came with the Olympic Games originally, but they stayed. And so they launched this Smart Manufacturing Summit in because in Aichi you have an airport, Chubu.
I think Chubu International or something
International
like that.
Airport, exactly. And next to the airport you have a big, event hall. And they wanted to, it's GL Events, I think, manages it. And so they wanted to use it for something big, and they organized this Smart Manufacturing Summit there. So the French Chamber of Commerce helped organize the event, and it was all about like manufacturing and so. So you can see how this region is also one of the manufacturing heart of Japan, and that's often something I point out to single out the regions compared to Tokyo, is that Tokyo is great for doing business in general, but if you want to see what Japan can actually make, what it can produce, it's not going to be in Tokyo, because in Tokyo you don't have any industry. You have offices, but it's too expensive to build a plant or anything. Even you have a few research labs, but even that,
they're usually outside as well.
They're usually outside. Actually, even if they're near Tokyo, they're going to be in like Yokohama or something. So if you want to see what Japan is capable of, you'd better come to the region. So Nagoya is for aerospace and car industry. And if you come to Kansai, so one step further west, you have the pharmaceutical industry. Okay, Osaka was the birthplace of the Japanese pharmaceutical industry. So of course, it's a little sad. A lot of the main offices were moved to Tokyo for those big companies, but still, a lot of the production is still here. And also recently, you have a lot of industry around the hydrogen, like a few new technologies, hydrogen, new batteries, that kind of things we could see recently really, I don't know, booming or blooming. And also a lot of different industries, like really after, like you have IT for those specific industries, but the industry in general, Kansai is also very strong. I mean, when I say Kansai, I should say like Osaka, Kobe mostly, and Kyoto a little, but in the picture I have in mind, Kyoto is more a research center, if you want to.
So it was a good university and was
exactly. You have a lot of strong universities in Kyoto. They also have the Kyoto Research Park with a lot of companies having big labs there for research. And I think Kyoto has more Nobel Prizes than Tokyo, actually.
True. I think I read this recently.
Yeah.
So if we summarize it, basically, Tokyo is good for doing general business, but the regions, whether it's Aichi, whether it's Kansai area, whether you go to Kyushu, is if you want to do something more specialized. If you're looking for something specific, look for it in the regions because you'll find more direct partners, you'll find a more direct access to the source, whereas in Tokyo, you're basically going to be going through the banks, so to say.
Yeah, and you also... it's more specialized, and also you still have a few big companies that are very, very present in the regions. You also, it's a little obvious, but Kyoto, you have all the touristic, like tourism and hospitality activity is crazy. Plus, you have Nara just next to it, so that's also Tokuten, specialty of this region, And I need to finish with Kyushu. Kyushu also has a few strong points that are very particular. First of all, I would say my love for Kyushu comes also from that. You can have a good life, a work-life balance in Kyushu. It's the weather is usually nice. You have the sea. We have the sea in Kansai and also in Aichi, but most of it is now industrialized, right? It's a minato, it's a harbor.
And so the further you go away from Tokyo, the better the work-life balance.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Maybe, I don't know if it's that clear, but you could say that. And in Fukuoka, you have still a lot of beaches and so on. So a few people I know would go to Kyushu even to set up a company just because, it's going to be nicer. Which also means you have a lot of startups going on in Kyushu, in Fukuoka, because you have this a little nicer environment, and the authorities picked up on that and are currently giving a lot of support to those startups. I know also we did a research on that recently. You have a cosmetic center there. It's not properly speaking cosmetic valley, but their ambition is to become a cosmetic valley. Means they want also to bring the production there. One of the big news of Kyushu is that TSMC, the Taiwanese semiconductor company, came to Kumamoto really recently, and a little like we said for Toyota, it's bringing with it a lot of other industries to Kumamoto. So you have those kind of specialization depending on the region, yes.
So a lot of things happening. Not everything happens in Tokyo,
no,
in Japan.
Not. Plus, in the regions, I would say it's not only that it's more specialized, it's also that you have a lot of, let me put it that way. If like one of the attractivity you can find in the region is that in Tokyo, the market in many ways is already fully booked. Yeah, there's
hard to enter.
It's hard to enter in some ways, I think. But in the regions, there are some blind spots, actually. Some things that are not where there's still a lot of things to do. So to develop some new activities, I think in the region you can have way more opportunities. Of course, maybe the money would be a little lower at first, but the possibilities, in my opinion, might be bigger. Yes, and easier to enter. Yes.
So it sounds like for the coming years with the Chamber of Commerce, you have a lot of work, a lot of opportunities, a lot of people to connect. To kind of wrap up our conversation, do you feel like there's maybe one more thing you'd like to share about your journey or your experience with the Chamber of Commerce that maybe our listeners can have as a final word?
Okay. First of all, if you want to do business in Japan, it's a challenge, definitely. But there are a lot of people who already did it, who can advise you. And we're also here for that, the French Chamber. I would add, actually, because we work a lot with other foreign chambers. And even if I like to point out why the French Chamber is great, I have to mention also that we work closely with a few other chambers in Kansai, for instance, the American Chamber of Commerce or the Swiss NEX, or this kyoryoku, this cooperation is very important. So if you want to come to Japan, don't hesitate to rely on the other people who already did it. The international community is, I would say, in my experience, rather open, particularly again in the regions. It's particularly close to. So don't be afraid. As I said, you just need to listen, to get attuned to Japan. And if you listen properly and you don't just try to do what you want to do, but try to do what you want to do inside the possibilities that Japan have to offer, probably you can do great. Yeah.
Thank you, Jean-François, for all the interesting stories of your journey, but also the interesting insights into how the French Chamber of Commerce is helping kind of extend this network of companies, of partners here in the regions as well. So super interesting. I hope our listeners like this as well.
I hope to.
We will make sure to add links in the description so they can find you and they can reach out should they need a contact partner here in Kansai. Thank you everyone for listening. This was Unpacking Japan, and we will be back again next week. Bye. Are you looking for another podcast episode to listen to next? If you like the one you just listened to, I'm sure you'll also enjoy the one that I've selected and linked in the description down below. Go check it out.